So I'm going to kick it off here by showing my screen, much like you're used to seeing since you've seen some of these Hangouts. We are here to talk with Mr. Bobs Gannaway, who is one of the developers, who is a writer, a director, an executive producer. Boy, oh boy, he has been involved in so many aspects of this. But in addition to that, of course, we're here to talk about Monsters at Work and these guys right here. You know, what a amazing new cast of characters. But before we dive into the characters, I wanted to talk a little bit about the story. So our favorite part about the series so far has been the story. We know that, and in fact, at your D23 presentation, you guys said, how much do you guys like Pixar's storytelling? And, people were, woo. So, I mean, you guys definitely did this right in the sense that you served that story first. And it wouldn't work without that great story.
Right.
The one thing I started thinking about, though, is in our interactions with Pixar directors, writers, and I know this is fully produced at Disney Television Animation and everything like that, but in our experiences talking with the Pixar writers, directors, the story starts as a gem that it comes from the director. They have this pitch that they give, and then they start developing the world, the characters, all these other things. In this realm, I heard you say in a different interview that, it took about a year to even get to that key nugget, that the story can grow off of. So
very obvious, seems obvious now.
Well, no, it's only obvious because, like you said, it seems, I heard in another view, you did the da-da-da-da, like that.
Oh, yeah.
It's easy, but it's not,
those are the opening notes.
Not easy to get there. How was this? How did you get involved with it, and how was the pitch different? Was this a approach of, hey, we want to do something with the monsters world, now let's try to figure it out? Because it's flip-flopped from what we're used to hearing about.
Is this a 6-parter series we're going to do? Talking, because this is going to take a while to answer the question. But let me. So I've had experience both at Disney TV, and then I was at Disney Toons Studios for a while, working under John Lasseter for about 10 years, and did one feature, Planes, Fire and Rescue.
Fire and Rescue, absolutely.
And so I've had both the long form experience, and I've lost track of how many series I did at TV Animation. I think 6 or 7 or 8. So what happened very simply was the woman who was in charge of Disney TV at the time asked if I would come over and develop a show based on Monsters Incorporated. They'd already gotten sort of the okay to sort of, develop an idea. And because I had experience both with a TV production, which is always challenging.
Yep.
But I'd also had
speed. Yeah.
It's great fun, but it's challenging. And I had experience also with in a sort of a theatrical environment to come over and try to make a series that I said in other interviews that really takes you back to Monsters Incorporated. That it looks like it, the characters, we get the cast back, and we work very hard to capture the look of the film. It's 20 years old, and that helped a little bit because of technology. So that required kind of a combination of my two experiences, both understanding the sort of, how a TV production works and the flow of that sort of pipeline, but what best practices could I bring from features to elevate the production?
Absolutely.
So that's kind of a nuts and bolts side. From a storytelling side, kind of the same thing a little bit, which is, we knew it was going to take place after Monsters Incorporated. We knew we wanted to introduce new characters and really not try to recreate the film from a storytelling standpoint. And honestly, not make the Mike and Sully show, right. But kind of do a little bit of a, I hate to say spin-off, but just explore another nook or cranny of Monsters, Inc.
Which could be nerve-wracking in itself, though, because now you're taking these beloved characters and not making them, they're still involved, but not making them the main focus. So you really have to do your due diligence and bring these new characters up to that level.
Yes, that was, there were many fears.
Yeah.
One was that the show would come out and everybody would be like, when are we going to get back to Mike and Sully? When are we going to get back to Mike and Sully? And, but we were, there was great support to like go out and create your own new characters and bring them to life into this world. So we were very excited about that. And, one thing, TJ, that really is interesting to me, which I didn't even think about, and you're the only person I've told this, so no one else is listening, hopefully. When we were making the show, I didn't really ever think of it as a sequel to Monsters Incorporated.
Yeah.
I never really thought that. I really felt it was more stories in that world with another group of characters. Because to make a sequel to Monsters Incorporated, if I had been thinking that, I probably would have crumbled under pressure.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy thing to do, to carry on their story and that legacy.
Right. So, and that's why we sort of used, that. So yeah, we worked for a while. We worked for a long time. We were exploring characters. We were exploring Tylor. We did a lot with his family and where he came from. And what you do is you take your character and you really figure them out. There's so much I know about these characters that is not in the show. I could tell you a little bit about some of that later.
Absolutely. I'd love to.
But, really exploring, and we really landed on this character of Tylor Tuskman. We knew that at one time it was going to be 6 months later, and he was wanting to be a jokester. He was practicing at home to be a jokester, and he was going to go and, apply for a job at Monsters, Inc., but then end up in the facilities department because his dad owns a hardware store.
You're right. I remember you saying that before. Yeah, about the hardware store connection.
Yeah, that's the only job he could get. So it's kind of like Mike and Sully in the mailroom. Okay, I'll take that entry-level position to get my foot in the door, and now I'll work my way up. And we worked that angle for about a year. And we were also having issues with Tylor's design. I think D23, we had the design now.
Yes.
But at one time,
there was like that earlier, it was at like the Annecy Film Festival or some film festival that they showed the yellow version with the 2 arms, even though he originally had 4.
Yeah, he's 4 arms.
Yeah.
And I can talk about that as well. That's another offshoot conversation, like character design standpoint. But anyway, so yeah, about a year of just kind of messing with that. We wrote outlines, we wrote full scripts. We had probably started storyboards, and we all got to a point really deep into the show, about a year. And this happens on features. It happens on almost every feature at some point. Like at some point, everyone understands that it's good, not great. And what can we do to make it great?
Yeah.
So put on the brakes, everybody just stop, and let's step back and look at it.
Yep.
And that's what we did. And believe me, our crew is made up of a lot of people from TV and a lot of people from features. And the people from like TV are like, what are we doing? We're stopping? And then the people from features are like, oh, it's the reboot, right on schedule.
It's normal. Yeah,
it's part of the process. So, you can make a film, you don't always have to reinvent it, but part of the process is really challenging your idea, even if you are deep into it. If you feel like it could be better, can we stop and make it better?
Yeah.
So about a year in, we did stop and say, it's just not clicking for some reason.
Yep.
And I don't actually, myself and another person actually had the same idea simultaneously, a person from Pixar that I was actually kind of talking with about it. And we both had the very similar idea, which is what if, what we ended up with.
Yeah.
It's the day they switch and I was thinking maybe it was a character who already worked there, and we were going to follow a character who's like had to do a career change in the middle of their career.
Yeah.
But we had this young character already we had created who had a home life and had dreamed of going to Monsters, Inc. So we kind of combined that idea of like, what if he's dreamt of being a scarer and went to school where Mike and I went to USC because that's where George Lucas went, right? So it's like take that idea, right? And he's always dreamed of that. Sully is his idol. He's top of his class, and then have the universe throw him a curveball. And to speak to your other question about a Pixar film, in general, and I'm not saying there's no tricks, but in general, the plot never starts until empathy has been created for the character.
For
The
sure.
audience has to care really before you want to start the plot. I'm not saying there's no rules. You can have things, but really, if the audience doesn't care about the character, as I've said in other interviews, people go to Disneyland to visit worlds and characters. They don't always go to visit stories.
Yeah.
They might, but for the most part, you go to spend time with characters you love and maybe immerse yourself in the world. So with the Tylor idea, we basically wanted to build empathy for him, and we thought that would be a great way that if we know, the audience knows that he wanted this so badly, and then the universe, you get one card you can throw down to make something happen to your character. Then the character should make everything else happen after that.
Yep.
But so the universe throws him a curveball, and now we have to see him deal with that. And it gets you a couple things. And one thing it gets you is initially when he goes down into Mift, it's defendable for him to be somewhat pushing back on them.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
A smidge on
we've talked about that in our hangout. Yep.
Right. So it's because you've built that empathy and the audience has gone on this little short journey with him, they're going to go, he's not being very nice, but I understand why. Yep. And that if you can get the audience to sort of be on your side in that sense, then you can have the character be flawed but still likable, which is tricky. That's why, just to talk, one of my points I was going to mention.
Yeah.
There was an outtake scene of him graduating.
Is this the deleted scene, which was just on like one of the Disney sites that released it?
Which, as you know, is completely finished.
Yes, and we talked about that. Like, this is rare to see a deleted scene with full music, lighting, everything.
It was scored, yeah. So that was cut at the last minute for pacing.
Yep.
And originally we went from him, getting the letter from, that he's going to be a scare. Then you go to the title sequence. Then we were going to go to graduation, and it ends with him saying, "So let's get out there and scare." And then you go right to a newspaper that says "No more scaring." That was the original sort of kind of action reaction cut.
Okay. Yeah.
So we cut it because we felt like when you write something, even when you make it, you start to test things like, well, if we take that out, do we still get it? And the answer was yes. You still pick up that information along the way. Yeah. The scene existed to build empathy, to understand that he was the first person from his family to graduate from college.
Yep.
His parents were supportive of him, and that he also called out friends in that scene that he liked. So it's like, okay, even though this guy's big man on campus and he's graduating top of his class,
he's still very grounded.
He's grounded and likable. Yeah. And so that was the purpose of that scene, but we ended up trimming it.
Yeah. And we speculated that was the case. Like, was it needed? It wasn't, but it did sell the story a little bit more, but cutting it right and getting it to Monsters, Inc., it felt really good to get there quickly though, because you're coming in not knowing all the details that you're going to get this whole new group of characters and everything like that. So I thought it was good to kind of speed it up to get people, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to see Monsters, Inc. right away, rather than more of the older. Yeah.
We did that in editorial also. There was an earlier cut where we didn't get to Monsters, Inc. until much later. We actually stayed with Tylor. One of the things that you'll often see in a Pixar film is you stay with the main character. The main character and the audience go on the journey together. And you rarely cut away to some sort of B scene where the audience is learning something the character isn't. So initially kind of tried to stay with Tylor as long as possible. But yes, it felt better, and we had made that early on, to get right back to Monsters, Inc. and kind of activate Mike and Sully inheriting their position as CEO. And I have a great editor I've worked with for years and years. And I did not direct these episodes either. It was Steve Anderson, who's from Feature Animation, and Kat Good.
I thought you had done one of them.
I was going to, but Anderson's so massively talented, and Kat Good.
I mean, you have a great crew, so let them do the work. You don't need to do the work. You've got other work you're doing.
the best situation is where you don't have to do anything, and you surround yourself with people much more talented than you who do great work. But your job really is to listen to everyone's ideas and support everyone to elevate the show.
Yeah.
But anyway, that kind of gives you a general idea. And so another thing I think some people don't realize is the show takes place, before Boo's door has been restored. There's always that question, is Boo going to be in the show? Is Boo be in the show? And the answer is no. And also, she can't be because the door hasn't been restored yet.
Correct. Yes. And that's one of the things that I think, we have settled on. That question will still come up from time to time in comments or something like that. But I think internal in our group that we do the YouTube lives for after each episode, we've kind of settled that, timeline doesn't work out yet.
Right. Because at the very end of the movie, you look, Sully has like a chart about laugh power. And I think there's a certain amount of months that have passed or something.
Correct.
So we did do it, we grabbed that, we looked at it, and we actually figured out a little bit of a timeline. Because if you also watch the show very carefully, several things we'll do is we'll have like a seating chart. So the laugh floor F, has 13 stations. And some people, it's always fun to read like reviews and like, the laugh floor is not occupied. There's no monsters on it because no one's funny.
They're training.
Yes, they're training. So if you'll notice on the first episode, I think it's Mike and Lanky, maybe one other one. There's 3, Flem. As the show progresses, the floor is building, is growing with more and more people on it.
Yes.
And we early on, we charted out all the doors and who's going to get them and who their assistants are, and then who are migrating from comedy class to the floor. And it's hard to keep track of all that stuff, any sort of progression thing like that. But so if you watch the show, you'll notice the floor F is becoming more populated as the series goes through its episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, that's demonstrated too, where, Mike is doing all the heavy lifting. He's got Fungus giving him the eye drops, cleaning his contacts, and he's exhausted. He's got to drink the energy drink. Great gags with Needleman and Smitty, bringing them back throughout. They are tremendous comic relief throughout this entire thing. So they are making my brain go to the characters. So as far as the characters themselves, when you guys started developing this, how did you determine that these are the character traits that we should have for the MIFT team? And were there any characters that they could have fit, but they got the boot because either you didn't need them or, whatever it is? Just how did you determine that these were the right characters for this?
What I did initially was I looked at ensembles, just any kind of, actually, to tell you the truth, we didn't really think of it as a workplace comedy until like a year into it. And I don't know who it said it. Really, maybe we're just not very smart, or maybe I'm not very smart. But like,
you guys are all too close to it.
Yeah, somebody said one day, there's 2 things. I mean, I'll get back to answer the question.
Yeah.
Somebody said one day, you realize this is a workplace comedy?
Yeah.
And then we're all like, you're right. It's like, it seems so obvious because it was going to take partly at home, and we're going to see his home life and his work life, like the old Mary Tyler Moore show. We're going to see her home in her apartment, and we're going to see her at work. By the way, look at the Mary Tyler Moore set in regards to the MIFT office. Very similar.
Love it. Good one.
So that's another one. It's like, that was a set we looked at because Lou Grant has a glassed-in office. Everyone's outside. So looking at ensemble groups, both contemporary ensembles from contemporary shows and also classic ensembles, and then just starting to think about like what kind of characters. Just you think about characters as individuals, and then it's really great if you think about them as pairing up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are the pairs that you want to create? I honestly don't know if we ever had characters that didn't make it. Banana Bread got graduated out much earlier than we thought. I mean, when we focus test, people are like, "We love Banana Bread." And we're like, "Oh no, we graduate him out on the second episode."
But I like the fact that he did move on, because that sets the stage that you can come from MIFT and make it to the joke floor, the laugh floor.
See, you're super smart. That was the purpose of that, was to give Tylor hope. And that's another thing. People can talk about, the pacing or this or that. Everything supports story. anything that happens on screen is there for a reason. There's no accidents in animation. Everything is laboriously planned out. So every line of dialogue, every action, either is going to tell you something about the character, about a relationship, or move the story forward. So so him, Miss Flint coming in and promoting him out was to give Tylor hope. There's hope for me to get out of here.
Yeah.
So you're very smart. Anyway,
well, we think a lot about it. I think the average person probably just watches it. We're sitting there like,
Yeah, there's choices. So every choice is driven by story, and story is driven by emotion. You just have to work your way back down to the core emotion that drives everything, and then the way you dress the set, the lighting, everything. So anyway, the characters. So. Looking at classic ensembles, one of my inspirations was Taxi, the original Taxi series, because I felt like I wanted to have a warm, sort of paternal hub character.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Fritz.
Yep.
And I wanted that character to be not broken. I wanted him to be happy. He's happy where he is. He drives his old car to and from work every day. He likes his job. He has no agenda other than to be sort of a warm paternal kind of center to the group.
Yeah.
Now, secret. We had an episode that we didn't make where you find out that Fritz's wife passed away when he had a daughter, and she was, after about a year, she was born. His wife passed away, and he raised his daughter on his own. And we actually had an episode where he was dropping his daughter off to Monsters University, and he was going to become an empty nester. And in that episode, he gravitates to Tylor to be his new kid. It was very fun.
Okay, so that would be like the circling it and bringing it all back together. Yeah.
Yeah, that didn't happen. So, but we knew that about him. So. And if you look, it's funny, if the art department, you look on Fritz's wall in the background, he used to be a surfer,
He's got all sorts of weird stuff in the back of his office.
Well, he's a Drooler Cooler fan, so he has antique Drooler Cooler bottles on one wall. But so we wanted that warm paternal hub character.
Yeah.
And then we wanted Monsters Inc. is, as you know, there's a lot of male characters in the movie, and not Celia and Miss Flint. So we really wanted to create this, I hate to say strong female character. I just want to say appealing, because I think that it's not about strength in the sense of it's just about a really appealing character that we can. And we were hesitant to make her sort of a college dropout at one point, because we didn't want to say but we really felt like we wanted her to be a free spirit. We don't want her to be, it's not that she's a cheerleader. We want her to be a free spirit and strong, and then have an opinion. And we want to make her a big monster, really, so she can punch the ground with her walk. And so Val, we just want to create a fun female character. And you'll notice that she's a curve, and that's very much on purpose to work against Tylor, who's very much a straight.
Yes, I saw you say that, the straight against the curve. She's challenging him, and they pair up quite a bit.
Yeah.
So you were talking about the pairing and making the good duos. And it's funny, Val is one of the characters that, and this is where a show is perfect for these characters, because you can see the slow progression over time. Right. And you can see not only their arc doesn't have to happen within, the third act or whatever, at the second act. It doesn't have to be defined. It can be ebbing and flowing throughout the show, and they're going to grow continually. Maybe they're going to drop off for a while, but her character was the slowest one that I came around to. But then after the Adorable Returns episode with the Abominable Snowman, I was like, all right, I get her now. I get her. I understand where she's coming from. I understand that I don't know. There's just something about her that now I have gravitated towards and get. And I love the fact that I didn't have to get it right away. That it's going to be layers.
Here's the backstory on her.
Yeah.
You never see. Val, her name is Little. I may have mentioned this in another interview. Her name is Little because she's adopted. And she was raised by very little monsters. She comes from a family of a bunch of very little monsters. So she was this big character in this little monster world. So she's very good. We wanted to make sure she's big, but she's not clumsy. Yeah. She's very good and articulate with anything she needs. Like she needs to tie a little shoe, she can do that because she took care of maybe her little brothers and sisters. But because she was adopted, she also has a little bit of fear of abandonment and really wants to always bring people together.
Oh, that is great.
Hence the last name Little.
Val Little, yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
We were going to do an episode where the Littles are part of the reconnaissance team that goes into kids' rooms to learn about them so they can come back and give the jokesters data on what the kids will think is funny. But we never got around to that one.
Yeah. All these ideas. I'm sure there's just like literally reams of ideas that, where do they fit? How can we fit them? You just tuck them away and who knows when they come back.
Hey, and just to digress for a second on ideas, another thing I wanted to do was a little bit more like a movie, and you touched on it with the directors having the germ of an idea and growing it. You'll notice there's no story editor on our series, and that reason for that was I wanted the directors to have ownership of their shows, like you would a movie. I told the crew, we're not making a series, we're making 10 little movies. And I wanted Kat and Steve to really have ownership of their episodes and feel like this is their show. This is their episode for them to tell the story that they want to tell. And the writers and we're all here to help, tell those stories.
Yeah.
And so, for example, the vending machine episode, there was no script initially. It started out just as an idea. What if they get a new vending machine?
Oh.
The story team just took it and started just doing gags and gags and gags. So,
yeah.
So again, touching on that. But back to character.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see here. Boy, oh boy. Okay, so
in Cutter and Duncan,
yes. So Cutter and Duncan is one that I wanted to talk quite a bit about too. So where did Cutter's backstory and where did her having all of these amazing one-liners come from? Okay,
so Cutter is a crab character.
Yep.
Crabs move quickly and in short bursts. If you look at like crab, they're like
Yep.
So it was always intended that she would speak in short bursts and move in short crab-like bursts. So we looked at crab footage of crabs moving and just thought about, okay, so what's the dialogue sort of version of that? So the kind of quickly clicking in, saying a zinger, and then exiting felt kind of crab-like. She's also safety cone shaped. That was originally an intention because she is safe oriented because she's been there so long, but that we had a little bit more of that early on. But so that's where that kind of came from.
She's too overzealous about waiting to see the next accident to happen to be too concerned with safety. Though.
Yeah, I know. I think we kind of dissolved away a little bit. Like she's been at Monsters Inc. for so long. There's always that person at work who's been there for so long and knows all the gossip.
Yep.
So that's kind of where it came from, just that phrase. And then, and this gets into story, in the pilot, Tylor goes down to Mift and gets, after he comes out with Duncan telling him to, I've got my eyes on you, or whatever Duncan says.
Yeah.
I'm watching you, or no, that would be yours. Anyway, he comes into that room. And when I was writing it, I'm like, I need one more thing to send him running out the door. Duncan sort of poking at him isn't enough. What can be the one thing that would make Tylor like, I'm out of here? And the idea was there's someone just like him that died.
Yes.
So the idea, he comes out and there's this like, congratulations, David sign or whatever it says. And he's like, who's David? And he died in the shredder shaft or whatever they say. And then we see that they made this little shrine with hair.
Yes.
And then Cutter seems to be like, oh, David. And which is Alana Ubach's like ad libs, which is great. And then Fritz says he was like a son to me too, whatever Fritz says.
Yeah.
And it's like a Stephen King novel. He's like, I'm out of here. It's like Children of the Corn. I gotta run. So that's where we ended up creating that David character. And then that character started. There's in Bad Hair Day, you're going to see maybe something about David. And so
yes, can't wait to see it. So yeah, Tylor's got to cover up that he loses this piece.
So you think about it. If Tylor wants to sort of like ingratiate himself to this group, how can you compete with a dead guy they put on a pedestal? So that was so it was, so anyway, and I think that might be a little bit where Cutter's obsession with collecting, leftover, trophies of the accidents came from.
Yes. Oh, so good. So good.
And then Alana Ubach, who does the voice of Cutter, fantastic. And she got Cutter right away because we said, look, we just want her to be a tough gal. She never takes her hat off in the show.
Okay.
And at one time we did have a scene, hopefully I'm not doing no spoilers, so we didn't do it, where she takes her hat off and she has this gorgeous just set of hair. That's just beautiful. Cat Good wanted to do, and we had the boards for it and everything, but it didn't happen. But anyway, so Alana did a great job. And so that's kind of where Cutter came from, sort of like the inspiration from the crab, always looking at research and what can inspire us, and tether it to truth. That's another thing we talk about. Is like, it's animation, and yeah, you can just sit and make things up, but if you don't have several tethers to truth, it becomes not real.
Absolutely.
Which is why they name characters just like Mike and things like that, because they're monsters, but they're named Mike, so they're immediately relatable.
Right.
There's some weird names, but like Argus, but they're
right. Right.
Anyway,
but
that's Cutter.
Okay, so I because you brought up Argus, I want to go there. That is one of the great episodes that has all of the different elements of Argus, the all-seeing eye that's tracking everybody. One of the elements that we talked about prior to the recording kicking off was the fact that you had seen that little moment that we talked about, that we had remembered in the back of our minds here, that Argus was tied in with the, the Greek mythology side of it. So where did that character come from? And that was the cover-up, if I remember correct.
Yes.
Yes. So that's the cover-up. So
I just want everybody to hear, I'm so proud of you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Wait a minute. I think people in our live chat would be very disappointed if I didn't do this sound effect.
So, yeah, when you name characters, you name it's like, oh, I'll name it after a crew member or name it after a friend. But, you're always looking for reasons. And I happened across that Argus. So an interesting thing about Argus, originally, because if you look at the Greek, monster, whatever that is, the eyes are all in his body. Yeah. Originally, Argus was going to open up his suitcase and swallow the eyeballs.
Oh.
They were going to protrude from his head. So his head had eyeballs coming out of every side. And then he would just walk around and his eyes are seeing like 360 degrees.
Wow. I like the idea that they eventually did morph out, though, but I like the connection that they were going to tie into more of the official Greek mythology side of it.
But it was just too hard of an effect that we couldn't make it look good enough. And quality is a big issue. Was a big one of our very things we want to make sure. So we just didn't, having it sort of come out of his head, it just didn't look very good, the effect, and so we ended up with the sort of suitcase of eyes, which is I think just as fun, having them kind of go around, having them hop out.
Yeah, amazing. It was so great. And okay, so the one thing that everybody in our chat talked about that evening after that episode was, the squishing of it. Was there any concern, or because somebody even said in the chat, they're like, how did they get away with that? Because that's dark, but it's awesome.
No, it was we never had an issue with that. And it has a nice squish pop sound effect on there. Had a fantastic sound effects designer named Todd Toon, who I believe his last name is Toon. And I've worked with Todd in the past, and so he's fantastic with sound effects. So
yes.
But there was never an issue with all of that, catching them. I think we even wanted to be more gruesome, but it was just, again, difficult to make it look the way we wanted it.
Right, yeah. How do you blend it and make sure it balances out and everything? So the other character we need to circle back on, though, is Duncan.
Yes.
One of the things that I got to know is his character is so beautifully designed, fleshed out, animated. Everything about him is just perfection in my eyes. I mean, right. Julie has her favorite character. She likes Cutter better. Sure. Duncan's my jam. But okay, how is he so good? And where did his, like, I'm always kind of evil, but yet I can care about you in the backside?
Okay, so there's a couple things with Duncan. Oh, can't remember exactly, but his design is based, I believe, on a development design from the original film.
Aha, okay.
So I can't remember whether they had that design had four eyes or it was kind of that pill shape with wings. But it was we had, of course, Pixar provided us with all of the development art from the original film and MU, and so we were sort of mining that for character designs. Not that we don't have wonderful character designer on the show, but just to be inspired by the world. Argus came from that too, by the way. I think
interesting.
I think there's an Argus style monster in the art of book.
In fact, somebody else brought that up, that there's one that's kind of like that comes up in Monsters U that has a whole bunch of fur, and it almost looks like it's that same character kind of design without the poof on the top.
Yeah, but I think there's actually a design very similar to Argus in the Monsters Inc. art of book. Maybe again,
I will dive back into it. I love it.
But yeah, with Argus, I wanted it to be very. So from the story standpoint, he's very wound tight at the beginning, right? Yes. So how can your character design help tell your story? So he's very tall, but he just has his little legs that just sort of like, they just kind of do a little thing, and of course at the end he's all loose and everything. Yeah. So it helps tell the story. You can visually see the change in the character from the way he was when he walked in to the way he is when he walks out of the door at the end. But anyway, back to Cutter. So it's interesting. Or sorry, Duncan.
Yeah.
So there was that inspiration. So you have kind of a sort of a character that's a little bit unlikable, but by giving him a pet, you can see that he has empathy. And so giving him Roto, we felt that helps make he does care for something. I guess that's why they give every Bond villain like a cat.
I was going to say, it's like, they always have like the hairless cat, and
but I think it's like, again, it shows you like, okay, so they're not completely. They do have some part of them that there is a little heart in there. So Roto was sort of created for that reason. And then just from a design standpoint, you want to make sure your characters are all instant reads, especially as silhouettes.
Yeah.
So if you look at the designs, Tylor's got these massive horns, because we really looked to see what they had at Monsters Inc. and Monsters, and no one's really done really crazy wide horns that can be both an asset and something that can get him in trouble, like when he gets pulled on the door system in Snowman.
Yes.
So there's that, and you'll notice in the first episode he's banging into things because he's uncomfortable and he's not comfortable in this environment. I mean, he's grown up with them, so he probably can navigate pretty well and when he's feeling good about himself. But so it was just something that we knew we could use. So, but he reads the silhouette, the wide horns. Val reads as this big horseshoe shape. Fritz is this kind of like big round pear.
Yeah.
Cutter is this triangle, and then Duncan has four eyes.
Yeah.
So no matter. And the wings. So if you just see them in silhouette, you immediately know who they are. You do that with color also, but that was sort of where we ended up with the four eyes.
Yes.
And then you have to be careful on your characters that you want to make sure the audience knows. We're all used to looking at people with two eyes, right? So you want to make sure you as an audience member, the audience member knows where to look. Where's the eyes am I mostly looking at? Yeah. So try to design it so you're kind of focused maybe on at least two of the eyes. They're not all doing different things, definitely. Maybe sometimes one will. But so there was that. So we were concerned about the eyes just in regards to sort of having the audience know where to look. But so he had the four eyes. And then the name Duncan P. Anderson. So Rob Gibbs, who, as you know, who passed away, but I was blessed to get to work with him for a while. He's such a wonderful, wonderful guy.
Yeah.
He and I were driving back from Pixar, actually. And we'd flown up there, but we decided to drive back because we wanted time to think in the car. And it's like a 5-hour drive down the middle of California. So we were probably talking about characters. Who knows what we were talking about? And we stopped at Anderson's Pea Soup, which is a little kind of roadside place you can stop by on the way down. and Anderson's Pea Soup sells this, green pea soup. And so you figure it out.
This is the most wonderful origins of his color and his name that I have ever heard.
Yeah.
That is fantastic.
So his name is Duncan P. Anderson. I think someone decided what the P stands for in an episode, but I can't remember.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, and then when you cast, I'll just talk about casting for a moment, because this might interest you if you haven't already know this. But the way we cast the show is we ask casting, we tell casting, we give them a character description. We have this kind of character, and then they will usually go through. They'll come up with a bunch of voices. Then they sort of sift through them and send over their 6 or 8 picks.
Yep.
And what we do is we put the character up on a screen, the picture of the character, and I get a piece of paper that has like numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and just blank space next to it.
Yeah.
And you just listen to the voice, and you look at the character, and you think, is that voice coming out of that character?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know who the actor is, so I'm not bringing that to the. Maybe you recognize the.
Yeah, of course you would recognize, I'm sure, but yeah.
But the idea is to try to. The actor is not going to be on screen visually; it's going to be their voice. So that's the way. So when Lucas Neff came in and read for Duncan and Tylor, it was and then we played it against the image. It was an instant.
I absolutely love his delivery. There is so much to it of the highs and lows that he can pitch between. Lucas is absolutely nailing that performance.
Fantastic. And all of the cast ad-lib a lot. And Lucas it's hard to keep him kind of, Ben Feldman does, Mindy obviously does. And so Henry, absolutely. So they all do. And that's the way we record the shows. Like the script is a starting point. And then I usually run the scenes with them because we record separately, especially during COVID. And we just start going off the rails. And Lucas definitely has a blast. So many of the things, I wish we could take credit for them. There's so many great things.
Oh, yeah.
And that's also how we got Henry Winkler. When we played Henry's voice against the image of Fritz, and he is such a lovely, warm man, so kind, always gracious. That was an instant too. It's like that's
like the top of the list. We don't have to worry about it. I feel good about this. Yeah.
And Fritz was named after my favorite history teacher who passed away a couple of years ago. So I know it worked out because things are on the Fritz, but it was actually named after my history teacher.
That's okay. Yeah, we talked about that as how did that name come up? But yeah, that's awesome. Nice little homage there for sure.
Before I forget, I'm going to tell you one more name origin.
Please.
The weatherman in the Snowman episode is named Don, the guy who melts.
Yeah. Yes.
Look up weatherman Don Woods, and you'll see the weatherman from my hometown, which is Tulsa, Oklahoma, when I was growing up.
All right.
Don Woods. And Don Woods was one of the reasons I really wanted to get into art, because he was the weatherman, but every night he drew a character named Gusty on TV that would tell you what the weather was going to be like. He'd do a little sketch of Gusty, and then somebody wrote in and would win the drawing and things like that. So that was my little.
Oh, look at this.
Don the Weatherman was a little homage to Don Woods.
See, and these are the things that, when you're doing a show that has this pace. Now, yes, you guys developed this for a long time, but still, there's still a lot of decisions, constant change that's going on. These are the things that are so great that are able to develop and swell and become what they become like this. And if you think of some of these TV shows, they might not have the time or the budget to do that. But you guys seem like you're really working hard, but having some fun with this too.